Okay, this is VK3AML making a second attempt at streaming after the very balky start that we had, and this appears now to have no dropped frames. You really can't tell from one moment to the other how internet will behave on this, can you? Some weeks it's absolutely faultless, and some weeks it really is a pain in the neck. VK3 Alpha Mike Lima. Well, now that we've re-established contact on YouTube Live, we'll go back to the video coverage shot by myself and Dave VK3ASE on Deal Island, showing our attempts at amateur radio over there, just in the Tasmanian border in the middle of Bass Strait, and our successful light beam communication from VK7 to VK3. So, without any further ado, over to the video. From Port Albert, Victoria to Deal Island, Tasmania, per the MV Nooramunga. Hi, I'm Chris Long, ham radio VK3AML, and in this series of videos I'll take you to one of the most beautiful, historic and rarely seen parts of Tasmania, the eastern Bass Strait Islands, and the holy grail of remoteness, Deal Island, midway between Flinders Island and Wilson's Promontory. We needed to go to test this device beside me, a modulated light beam communication system for transmitting speech and data, rather like microwave radio, but with the promise of broader bandwidths, greater privacy, and the freedom from any radio licensing requirement. I can fire it up. It's not particularly bright. We're not talking something like a laser here, and it's quite eye safe. But this is actually transmitting my voice in variations of brightness at the moment. The beam is broad, but it doesn't diverge. It's well collimated. We'd already set a 168 kilometre world distance record with similar gear in 2005. But could it somehow link Victoria with Tasmania? Nobody had ever done this. A small group had achieved digital transmissions of only their own call sign by Morse and one way back about 10 years earlier, but it wasn't qualified as a contact until it was a two-way contact. Furthermore, we wanted to transmit something useful like speech or data or video. For this, we needed a high Tasmanian vantage point in sight of Victoria. An old, well-elevated but disused lighthouse site was ideal, and that's exactly what Tasmania's Deal Island offered. The January 2021 expedition was our fifth try to reach Deal Island. Attempts to cooperate with proposed de-expeditions there in 2011 and in 2019 failed. There were lack of shared aims, poor planning, leadership grabs, ego, and a narrow focus on HF radio, all contributing factors to the blame. One guy claimed that our cutting-edge stuff had nothing to do with ham radio. Another told me to apply for membership after I'd already been invited to participate with the group. With the better part of $1,000 to be sunk into this venture, that was unacceptable. We were pushed out twice in a decade. We learned our lesson, and neither of those groups that I mentioned ever made it to Deal Island. By late 2019, my wife and I decided that our only option was to organise and finance our own expedition. We had an excellent team of 4 friends who'd already toured New Zealand together, ready to go. Stephen Langley, ham radio VK3SL, is a music teacher, a cellist, having an interest in the history of electronics. With 5 offspring who regularly go camping with him in remote locales, Steve knows about equipping people with reliable survival equipment, budgeting for the right type and amount of food, water and safety gear. Dave Stewart, ham radio VK3ASE, is a recently retired ABC News sound recordist and camera operator. He's a hardened camper in remote environments with a full complement of lightweight HF transmitting gear, solar panel power supplies and a deep expertise in radio communications, not to mention good video camera gear and editing experience. Mike Groth, ham radio VK7MJ, is a recently retired scientist with a PhD in radio astronomy and nuclear physics. His knowledge of low-light measurement and detection techniques, atmospheric physics and circuit design are our backbone in scientific expertise. Then there's me, ham radio VK3AML. Background in electronics, later broadcaster and author, specialising in the history and preservation of non-print media, film, photography, sound recordings, television. Another 20 years in museum curatorship and historical documentary video production, but now retired. In November 2019, Dave and I toured the South Gippsland ports, Welshpool, Port Franklin and Port Albert, assisted by a local operator, Chris Chapman, VK3QB, shopping for boat charters to Deal Island. We spoke to a few boat operators who were landlocked by the appalling weather, as you'll see. But in the end we went for a 50-foot sail-assisted motor catamaran, the Nooramunga, out of Port Albert, run by the team of Wynne and Carol Hobson, who've both been in the maritime game since childhood. The Nooramunga travels more regularly to Deal Island than most other craft, from the wharf where the old lighthouse resupply vessels once operated. We booked to go to Deal with them on the 9th of January 2020. On the day before, Steve, Dave, Mike and I all travelled down to Port Albert to spend the night prior to embarkation. Down to the old Alberton pub for what we thought would be our last hearty mainland meal, then up at 5, down to the Nooramunga, where the weather had turned sour, and Wynne told us that the trip had to be postponed. A single shot of the Nooramunga's interior. Dark disappointment on everyone, but all glad that safety was paramount. The next possible departure date was April 2020. Mike Groth and I used the next week to scout the hills of South Gippsland for vantage points with a view to Deal Island for our Shore Lightbeam Communications Group. The engineers Chris Morley, VK3CJK, and Ralph Edgar, VK3WRE, both from the Latrobe Valley, have the necessary specialist light beam gear to intercept our Deal Island signals. Bushfires were raging further east, and the smoke put such a pall over southern Australia that it would have blocked our light beam. Perhaps the delay was a godsend after all. At Carajung, in the eastern Strzelecki Ranges, we had the elevation necessary, but lots of tree cover blocking views. There was also a load of bull discouraging our usage of the site. Not the first time communication has been blocked by excess bull. And speaking of that, this is VK3AML. Concurrent with playing this recording, there is a video component. If you care to watch it on YouTube Live, look for VK3AML 31 July 2021. If you Google that, you'll probably find the necessary YouTube stream. That's, again, Google the phrase VK3AML 31 July 2021. You should find us. So back to the live stream and the video. Along the Grand Ridge Road further east at Black Warry, with an elevation of 650 metres, we noted coops in the pine plantations to the south, with good views towards Deal, but we moved on as we had better hopes for the 740-metre summit of Mount Tassie, the source of Gippsland's television transmissions. But there, the view towards Deal was blocked by trees and a low ridge.
Deal Island is somewhere over there, and that hopefully through the gap in the trees.
No hope. Black Warry looked like the most likely spot. Then the 2020 bombshell dropped. The COVID pandemic crisis was on us, and travelling to any part of Tasmania became illegal. The April 2020 departure date passed, so we rescheduled Deal Island for September 2020. But the border was still closed, so we rescheduled again for January the 8th, 2021. By then, our team member Mike Groth had been ill and his mobility was compromised, so he had to withdraw from our team, to our sincere regret. Mike's design work on our light beam gear was vital to the project. It was terrible for all of us not to have Mike with us for the culmination of his effort. Stephen Langley's 18-year-old son Henry, ham radio VK3AML, took Mike's place on the team, and though his skills were different, he proved to be an equal asset to our crew. Unlike the previous summer with its bushfires and its smoke, the end of 2020 was very wet, washing the air clean with exceptionally good resultant visibility. It was looking good for our light beam contact. To achieve a link between Victoria and Tasmania, you have to cross the borderline at latitude 39 degrees 12 minutes south. The nearest island to that border is Hogan, but it's uninhabited, treeless, and has only a survival shelter on it. Deal is inhabited with forests, buildings, and a mountain 300 metres high. First, we have to do 3 hours on the road to Port Albert, then a weather-dependent 7 to 10 hours on the boat to Deal Island. We decided to forego staying the night at Port Albert on January the 7th. So after an afternoon sleep at home in Melbourne, we stuffed Steve Langley's minivan with all of our gear at midnight, and Steve drove us through the night for the 220 kilometres to Port Albert, arriving at 4 a.m. It was cold and windless, perfect for the departure to Deal Island. Our first view of the Nooramunga in pre-dawn darkness. Then we tried to catch a bit more sleep as dawn broke. There we could load the Nooramunga for the 8-hour voyage to Deal. Wind came out at 5:30 and helped us to load up. We could hardly believe that on this, the 5th attempt at getting to Deal, everything was falling into place. We actually were leaving. And there was plenty to see on the way. For the first hour of the trip, the Nooramunga winds its way through the narrow channels between South Gippsland's low and largely flat sand islands. The sand in these channels slowly shift with tides and river discharge. We were glad to have someone as experienced as Wyn Hobson at the helm, constantly checking marker buoys, depth soundings and radar. Then, like magic through the salt-encrusted bow windows, the promised land. High, wild, and much more beautiful than any photos we'd seen. Dave reading about shipwrecks in the neighbourhood. Wynne checking cricket scores. Steve through the window, reclining against the starboard rail to settle his tum. Southwest Island, a Kent Group outlier. I went outside for the final approach. It was becoming spectacular, skirting east of Erith Island's cliffs and heading for Garden Cove on Deal. North-East Isle, another Kent Group outlier, home to 200,000 pairs of mutton birds with a navlight on the top.
That's 200,000 birds. They didn't have the navlight on top,
The
the island
cliffs
did.
of Erith Island. That tiny white dot so high is Deal's Lighthouse, where our light beam test would be. Murray Pass, the channel separating Erith from Deal, coming into view. Somewhere in those cliffs is the Great Cave of Erith, a deep fissure 50 metres above the sea, where evidence of human habitation 9,000 years ago was found. Then, as we cleared Murray Pass, the mystery locale of one of Deal Island's earliest sketches, the Giant's Rock, drawn in 1854 by the first Anglican Bishop of Tasmania, Francis Russell Nixon. The mystery revealed. It's now known as the Indian's Head. A close view of North-East Island. And the neighbouring Anvil Rock. Henry and Steve were now so impressed by the scenery on such a perfect day that they were drinking it all in, exhaustion and nausea forgotten. Erith receding behind, and an islet off Pegleg with remnant eucalypts, saved from Deal's frequent fires by its geographical separation. We caught sight of the beach that was to become our home for the next 4 days. We were not alone at Garden Cove. In summer, yachties and runabouts frequently shelter here en route from Tasmania or Victoria, or just hang out fishing in the isolation. I later discovered that this was also occasionally used as an unpatrolled drop-off point for the international drug trade.
Yeah. But it's not hot down there.
That's Dave and Steve going ashore, the first to go ashore. A little Zodiac.
Henry and Dave were the first to go ashore with the Zodiac. We made 3 trips in
And
with
Dave
people
has
and
stepped
gear.
ashore.
The 4 of us, the former lighthouse keeper's daughter and her daughter. Tents, food, water in 2 40-litre jerry cans, which we set in the dunes above the tide. Cooking equipment, radio gear, the light beam transceiver, and the essential Jimmy's Thunderbox with sealable plastic box to be returned to Melbourne. We were met by the patrolling locals. Every day, these Cape Barren geese did their version of changing the guards at Buckingham Palace. There was no food for them on the beach, so why did they come here? Island caretaker Vicky in the overalls with Wynne about to leave us. And here's a map of the Kent group. We had a camp at the north end, as you see. The lighthouse settlement is where the houses are marked, and then further south, up on top of the highest point on the island, 300 metres, was the lighthouse itself, from which we'd do our light beam experiments.
Garden Cove is idyllic in good weather.
And now Dave doing a bit of the commentary.
The valuable light beam equipment is being transferred.
And there's me in the red coat, almost falling in the landing vessel. By this time I'd had 3 hours of
Now
vomiting.
Mr. Long gets in.
After 3 hours of seasickness, I was feeling pretty queasy by this point. That's my video camera coming back down to me there.
Goodbye.
Waving to the...
It's just
people
like
on
a
the vessel.
D-Day landing without the bullets.
Very unsteadily getting out of that Zodiac. Not well done, Chris.
And everyone's out safely.
Makes me realise I have to lose weight.
Now to check supplies and set up camp.
After
Looks like Mr. Long is very tired.
Mr. Long is seasick. Flat out seasick.
Time to talk to the neighbours, who were visiting the island because the lady there, her grandfather was a lighthouse keeper here in the 1960s. We have to now check our maps and geography of the place.
We're looking at the earliest photographs of the island taken by the Field Naturalist Club of Victoria in 1890. We worked out that we were near their old camp.
That way?
Yeah, so you're looking at Garden Cove in 1890.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is that way. That's definitely the hill here.
yeah.
And those rocks are obscured by all the she oaks.
Yeah, so they're somewhere over in that patch over there.
The trees.
There's another creek branch on the other side.
Yeah, fair
There.
enough.
But that's up at that hill there.
Yeah, you can see the way it sort of comes down.
Yeah. And Mr. Brown, the lighthouse keeper, with his water
I
cart.
like the water cart. It's like a furphy cart.
Yeah. Don't you like the bullock team that they had here at the time?
Give it away, don't they? They're covered in trees and things. Okay. Oh yeah,
So
that's really
There's our campsite
yeah,
now,
we're definitely here, aren't we?
and here they are.
Yep.
What's got me is that this sand dune doesn't seem to have been there at the time. See, that's where we're camping now, and that's where their camp was, on the other side of the river, somewhere over there.
Yeah.
131 years ago. Between your place and Paul Higgins.
And then we tested the light beam gear to see that it was all okay.
This comes off.
This is a transceiver, one lens for
These are
transmitting, the other
underpants
for
elastics.
receiving.
I can see myself twice.
That's just to protect from the sun. If the sun gets through those, this goes up in flames. Unfortunately, it wouldn't have been 2000.
No.
Yeah, you'd have to cross out the O and put a 1 there instead.
Okay, the light beam gear got there safely.
Spread those legs.
So is that a full
It was a fairly wind-blown spot, as you can see. For 4 days, that was civilization.
I don't know whether this will capture it, but the sound of
wind in the she oaks is something quite haunting, something I remember from my youth on Flinders Island. The walk from Garden Cove to the settlement comes up through that she oak forest. We go through this gate here into the old airstrip. The only problem in summer is the old airstrip is completely unshaded and rather unforgiving to walkers trying to avoid the sun. The airstrip from the upper gate, it has an electric fence solar powered around it to keep the kangaroos out, otherwise they can't land planes here. Pardon the jerky walk towards the gate. There's the airstrip towards the northeast and towards the southwest. You can hear the thumping of the electric fence.
Ha ha! Ha!
It's the way to annoy Cape Barren geese, who are highly territorial. This is a place called the Telstra seat on the Garden Cove track, where we've set up a temporary ham station, 70 centimetres, 2 metres, using this setup, an FT7900. This is the operating position on the bench we've been using. You can see my FT7900 there, and we have an antenna which is designed for reception from caravans, holding a antenna up the top there, which I won't concentrate on. And you can hear the Bass Hill repeater there, which is coming through that gap between Erith and Dover Island. You can see the mountains of Wilson's Promontory on the horizon, Mount Verica, Mount Latrobe and Mount Oberon. I'm not quite sure which are which. Oberon isn't the highest, but that's that rock swashway there joins Dover Island on the left with Erith Island on the right, and we're looking straight through it towards the Bass Hill repeater like a gun sight. It's the best repeater to get me back to Melbourne from this locale. So turning around to my operating position again, there it is. I've been sitting there for most of Monday morning, chatting.
I believe you're doing something with light communication. Justin VK7 Tangle Whiskers, I think, done something similar across Bass Strait at one stage. I'm not sure if that's the same thing you guys are doing, but good for you guys to get out there, and I'm glad you've got some decent weather. VK3AML, VK7 Echo Victor.
213 kilometres away at Burnie, Tasmania, we were recorded by Mike. VK7MD recorded us.
His name's Chris, and he's VK3AML. So, yeah, Chris, say hello to Mike. That's Mike over in northwest Tasmania. He's up near Mount Duncan. Actually, he's right underneath Mount Duncan, as I recall. Yeah, so VK3AML. Give 3VK7 Mike Delta a call. Up.
VK7 Mike Delta, VK3 Alpha Mike Lima. Yeah, running about 20 watts. As I say, I have to limit the time on this because I'm using 7 amp hour lithium phosphate. What do they call them here? Lithium iron phosphate batteries. The same shape and size as a 7 amp hour gel cell, but much lighter. The antenna is a Diamond VX50 vertical that's tied to a 3-section extendable caravan TV receiving antenna mast, and that in turn is tied to a garden seat that I'm sitting on halfway along the track from the Deal Island Lighthouse settlement to Garden Cove, where we're camped. I'm amazed. A couple of people from the Burnie area have been saying they're getting me direct. I can't quite understand how we do that. But anyway, across to the VK7 station. VK3 Alpha Mike Lima portable VK7 on Deal Island.
Yeah, copy mate, VK3AML on Deal Island, VK7MD in Burnie. Yes, I just switched to reverse on this frequency, and you're a 910 dB here on reverse. So I'm wondering, I won't hold you up there, I'm wondering if when you finish you might just like a simplex contact like on 146-500 or something like that. Your name's Mike this way, back to you.
Look, Mark, would you like a QSY to 147.475? That's the liaison frequency we're using on this island.
Okay, I can do that. 147.475. I'll wait for you there.
No worries, VK3AML QSY, and cheers to the VK2 station. VK7... I've forgotten. VK3AML, can you get me?
VK3AML, you're actually stronger here than you were down on the other frequency. Is it Graham? I'm not real sure. Incredible. Yeah, you're probably 30, 40, 50 dB here. We're in Burnie, and yeah, that's quite incredible. I'm speechless over.
Yes, 7 Oscar Romeo, take it. VK3AML port 7 on Deal Island.
From Garden Cove, you come to East Bay, that's Dover Island on the right, and this is the closest thing that we have on Deal Island to civilization, the lighthouse settlement. Those are the old diesel drums on the left. They've stopped using diesel, more or less. And up there, if you look closely, there's a Cape Barren goose. Coming into the old lighthouse settlement. There's the solar panels. Massive solar array. They have 240-volt power here. And there's the old 1840s lighthouse keeper's cottage in its original condition.
There are photographs from the 1890s where this scene looks very little different. The lighthouse keeper's cottage was built in 1848, one of the first around the coast, and I think the oldest
old
surviving.
light station. And there's the original building and the wall of solar panels. And that is the workers', I suppose you'd call it dormitory. Multiple bunks in there, kitchen facilities and whatnot, unfortunately inaccessible to us. Something that I've noticed when being here is a sound that I recognise from Flinders Island, and that's the whistling of the wind through the she oaks, which you may be able to hear in the background behind me.
I'll just pause that there to say that because we've run late, because the YouTube live stream was so poor to start off with, I'll run this through to 11:30. If anybody is around then, we'll stand by for a callback at that point. So 11:30 for going live this week rather than 11 o'clock. I'll send it back, I'll turn it back now to the video of Deal Island. The view from the dormitory north. And that is the present caretaker's residence, the red brick building. We're high above the sea there, about 150 metres above the sea. It's quite a walk up from the anchorage at East Bay. Originally there was a rope haulage to bring stuff up. Every time the plane... That's me. Trying to get a reaction out of the Cape Barren geese, but no luck. That's the radio hut at the left there. The old lighthouse keeper's dwelling on the right. Into the radio hut. A lot of heritage equipment in here, including the school desks that the kids of lighthouse keepers did School of the Air on. Weather forecasting equipment. Battery chargers of great age. Codan equipment. Power supplies. The telephone that originally connected this location with the lighthouse. And now a tour of the old 1848 building. Those huts at the left are for flammable material stores. Amazing that this building has been there for 173 years. You can enter from the back there, through the back door and into the Skillion back rooms. Flagstone floor there. Old brazing and welding equipment, firefighting equipment. This is maintained as a museum now, it's not actually used as a dwelling. This is where they used to butcher their own meat from their own herds of sheep and cattle to keep themselves going when the supply vessels couldn't get in. There's a little library of local literature for anybody, yachties or whatever, who wants to find out about the history of Deal Island and the Kent Group. Amazing to think this was all built in 1848. The rear kitchen, with a list of the volunteers of the Friends of Deal Island group that keeps this island maintained. Visitors book. Kettle on the hob in the fireplace. 173 years of usage. And the original timber roofing is still underneath the sheet iron. Into the original living room, now set up as a museum display. Very nicely curated actually by the Queen Victoria Museum in Launceston. It's one of the most remote museums in Australia. Crosses from graves of unfortunate sailors who died on the island back to 1849. Imagine the number of fires that fireplace must have seen in all those years. They've kept the original wallpaper, about 7 layers of it, must have been changed every 7 years or so. Quite a few interesting displays of material related to the lighthouse keepers as well. A write-up on the Erith Mob, an academic group who occupy Erith Island every summer, was started by Stephen Murray Smith in the 60s. That little rattan setting was made by a fisherman for the daughter of a local lighthouse keeper. Beautifully made. Dates from the 30s, I think. The upstairs area is not accessible to the public, accessible by a very steep stairway. And up there the walls are papered with wallpaper from newspapers from about the 1906 or 7 period. Some of the wallpaper is original from the 1840s. Up the front hall, into the wreck room, as they call it, where articles from shipwrecks are on display. Again, very nicely curated, considering how remote this museum is and how few people see it. Bottles from various wrecks going back to the start of white settlement. timbers from various ships that have gone down around the Kent group. The White Squall are right up on the first lighthouse keeper, the Bodenay family. They had 13 children here. SS Bulleye that went down in Murray Pass in 1883, I think. And this is probably the saddest exhibit, an RAAF plane that stacked onto onto Deal Island in 1943. Only remains of it there. 4 RAAF trainee pilots died in that crash. The wreck is still there up on the hill, near the lighthouse. And there's the lighthouse up on the highest spot, looking south from the keeper's cottage. Across the other side of the entry hall, the living room, or bedroom it would have been originally, master bedroom, and that is the grandfather of the girl that was staying near us at the encampment at Garden Cove, taken in the 1960s. Original slow combustion stove from the 1880s, I think. Panoramic shots taken from the lighthouse. In those canisters are signal flags, no longer used, and a display of books used by lighthouse keepers through all that period, and other sundries. Out the front, Dave, I think, was sitting having his lunch. 3ASE.
Just doing a guided video tour through the ruin.
That's the rain gauge out there in the paddock. And this is at lunchtime.
The new caretaker's house. They're playing cricket on Erith Island.
Dave had an excellent telephoto.
Oh, looks like they got a hole-in-one or whatever they get in cricket. Nothing made of metal lasts very long here. Now we've done our sightseeing, it's time to carry all the gear up the lighthouse hill.
And what a hill. I'll never forget the walk up there. Very steep, very slippery. This is the best part of the track. You can see I'm carrying the light beam gear in my hand. Dave actually had the tripod in his pack. He was shooting this video as well. I've got a towel over my head to catch all the sweat. Although it was only 26 or 27 degrees, it was very humid. We built the light beam communication device extremely light so that it could be taken up these tracks to mountain tops, which often you can't approach in any other way than on foot. Then we got to the top, and even a Baofeng could get through to Victoria. Here we are up 1,000 feet.
VK3AML. Have an indescribably gorgeous view of just about everything from here. The whole of the Kent group. I'm standing at the footings of the lighthouse, bright white. The old oil store from 1849 is just down below us, a ruined house.
Anyway, since you've made the climb, you must be in pretty good order, so...
We've got Steve is victualler.
And there's the old oil store and one of the old lightkeepers' dwellings. There used to be 2 settlements, one at the bottom of the hill and one at the top. The light which stood there from 1848. And that's our light.
Battery to reach that.
At this stage, all we could do was wait for dusk. There are quite a few Bennett's wallaby hopping about too. They were very tame, as you can see.
After all these years, what's it like to actually be about to do the experiment?
Well, Deal Island, it's an extraordinary place, and we've been at this for 50 years. You've been witness to some of the early tests. 47 years ago, Dave, so you should know. It's quite a... If we achieve it, it's going to be a significant technical achievement. We're using Luxion LEDs, and they're only 1 watt, but they're being focused through Fresnel lenses that are 10 inches by 8 in size, so that we can get a very fine beam, almost a laser beam, back to Victoria if the conditions are right. We've got a bit of a temperature inversion going on, so I can get on VHF and hear repeaters from both Tasmania and Victoria. But the question is, will we have enough atmospheric transmissivity to make the light contact? It'll be interesting to see.
Okay.
Waiting for nightfall. We were really pushing it to get the distance we needed, 135 kilometres back to the coast of Victoria, and it wasn't entirely clear. There was a bit of a mist there. Here we are firing up the light beam unit, the transmitter modulated light on the left, and the detector photodiode on the right, behind the dark lens.
And recording now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
We were scanning the horizon to try and find WRE and CJK. Meantime, communicating via a Baofeng handheld. And Dave has dubbed in some dramatic music.
Okay, we're about to start scanning the horizon with the light VK3 CJK, VK3AML.
Yeah, Roger, Chris. I'm looking through binoculars now, so go ahead.
Okay, it's not quite dark yet, so you probably won't see us until it's properly dark. Like seeing, if we can't see stars, you won't see this. Could you hold that? Thanks.
I should add that I hadn't had much sleep at this stage. I was windburned, sunburned, and the previous day had had 3 solid hours of vomiting off the back of the boat. Not good at all.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Hoping that as I scan it, they'll hear me at the other end. Dave with the pseudo dramatic music. Scanning, scanning, scanning. After about 10 minutes worth, we wondered if we'd ever succeed.
Where exactly are you?
On the main lane.
On the what?
He was being facetious.
It's a bit hard to say exactly where we are, but
That's Chris Morley, CJK.
we're almost at Black Warrie. If you travel from Currychung to Black Warrie, we're almost at Black Warrie. Over.
And that was via
Okay,
radio, of
well,
course.
If I'm hearing you through Tassie, that should be right.
Dave had a small illumination light. Eventually, when it was finally fully dark, Dave was able to video us in infrared, so that we appeared in green and black, not black and white. By this time, we were a little bit worried that we weren't going to succeed.
Are you scanning your light over the horizon? The first recording. And switch off.
Connecting the battery. That's the lithium battery on the ground there.
I can see your light.
We're all watching the horizon to see if we could see a red flash somewhere.
We thought we saw a flash earlier.
Yeah, we are transmitting at the moment.
We are hearing you. Hello, hello. Do you
Finally,
get us?
we were linked.
Pointing at you again. Hopefully you're seeing that okay.
We're hearing it.
Yeah, Roger, we can hear the siren, we can see your light. Oh, we did last week.
Thanks, Terry. I can actually see the light. It was brighter earlier. He's sending a siren tone.
All we had to do was to get them to switch.
You really should put some voice on this, you know, you bastards.
We could hear him very clearly on the siren tone.
There's a lot of scintillation on you, but I can hear you well. That's better. Now just give us some voice so we can make a contact. Hello, VK3WRE, VK3AML. When you're getting to maximum brightness, you're quite good. That's better. Hello, can you read me? VK3WRE, VK3 Alpha Mike Lima, Portable 7 on Deal Island. Can you hear us? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. VK3WRE, VK3 Alpha Mike Lima on Deal Island, calling and standing by.
Could you put the tone on again, please, so we can just speak it on you?
It's on.
Yeah,
John,
Roger,
it's on.
tone's on at the moment, no problems at all.
That's Steve in the background there.
VK3SL and company.
We're straight at him, aren't we, I think?
Yes.
We've just spanned Bass Strait, mate.
Well, we haven't caught the whole straight. We've got
And there he is via light.
so good. There's a full jet time. Over.
Okay, do you have 2 light beam units there? Do you have 2 light beam units there?
Ralph turned off at the moment, I believe. He's got mine on. Mine's probably the brighter one.
Yep.
But Ralph has been tested and it does work. Would you like to have a go with Ralph? Over.
Okay, let's stand by for Ralph. This is VK3 Alpha Mike Lima by light beam to VK3AML Portable 7 to VK3 WRE now, VK3WRE. Do you copy VK3AML?
You're not hearing that at all, right, Ralph?
Contact and proven that it can be done.
Indeed so, and yes, well, certainly we extended our original distance record, so it's a good thing, Chris, over.
Yeah, well, we've extended the Victorian distance record. We're not up to the 168k that I did in Tasmania in 2005, I think it was. But that was exceptional circumstances.
Yeah. So, very good.
Yeah, it's incredible. I can have just a normal duplex conversation with you.
Yes, it's good, isn't it? It's, like you say, full credit to Mike. He's done a lot of work in the background, certainly. And,
Mike's had a very bad year of it, so...
yes, I believe.
And I'm just putting my hand over the mic so that...
less wind.
Yes, we've got a lot of wind up here. Right, well, I've got 2 sets of headphones here. I don't know who's on the other set at the moment. Who's on the other set? Anybody? Just hang on a sec, I'll put somebody else on. Okay. Steve, are you here?
Yes, I am. And who am I talking to? What's the call
You're
sign?
talking to Ralph, VK3WRE.
Oh, okay.
Have you got the headphones on?
Okay, I'll just put these...
Where are the headphones?
We're using to record.
Where have the headphones gone? Hey,
Okay, we're right. VK3WRE, this is VK3SL, and looks like we've got a result.
Yeah, finally, after all that chatter on the repeater. That's excellent work, Steve.
Oh, congratulations, Ralph. It's great. We can see your light on the horizon. It's really quite a... It looks really prominent, actually. It's like a star rising above Erith Island.
Yes, it certainly is. I remember when Chris and I did it back in 2007, it was very much like this as well. Very bright.
Yeah, no, really good copy, actually. It's great. So, well done, fellas. It's a fabulous outcome. I'm sure this can all be put together as a excellent YouTube specimen in time. So, yeah, good effort. Wonderful stuff. Right,
Certainly.
Yeah. All right, VK3WRE, VK3 yourself. I'll pass over to Dave if you want to. No, Dave's busy with the camera. And
Dave's trying to get a recording of us, I think, in infrared light or the little light that he can manage while we're transmitting.
Yep.
I'm actually recording on a little digicorder, so everything that's happened tonight has been recorded, and I'm getting sufficient backscatter on my own signal to record my end as well.
Yes, I've been getting plenty of backscatter on my system of Chris and vice versa.
Yes.
Normal. Plenty of blades of grass in front of us, and that causes...
I'll put Henry on.
FACT, okay, yep.
Yeah, close. VK3WRE, this is VK3FACT. It's pretty cool, be able to talk through like this.
On the old one,
Yeah.
What's your name,
Henry.
Okay.
Yeah.
ACT, yeah, I have to remember that.
Yeah.
Very good.
Cool.
It's quite remarkable.
It is. I've never seen something like this
As you
before.
know, Chris has been working on this for a long, long time.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been at it since about 2006.
Wow. Yeah.
It's quite a remarkable thing.
Yeah, great to talk. I'll pass you back on to Chris.
I think the intention is for Dave to intercut our end with your end off the digicorder.
Oh, okay.
So we'll be able to make a YouTube clip of this. We've taken hundreds of photographs since we've come to Deal Island. I wonder how far this is. It would be over 100k, wouldn't it?
How far is it? Hang on, I'll ask Ralph.
Okay, you're asking Ralph how far this is. Any idea?
135.
130.
This is actually a historic moment. Oh, let me pay some tribute. Let me pay a tribute to VK3AML, who was instrumental in the design of and construction of a lot of this equipment. Yeah, well, very, very well done. Congratulations to both of you. I really wasn't expecting this to work so well. Well, this is VK3AML at about, 10:30 on
10:39
on the 9th of January 2021, and we've just succeeded in linking VK7 and VK3 with two-way light speech communication via... I should stop that there and say, if I look absolutely buggered, guess what? I was. This communicator, which we've christened Herbert, and VK3AML was very instrumental in part of the design and a lot of the construction of this, so it's a great pity he couldn't be with us at this moment. That's all, really. We've had 3 CJK, 3 WRE, 3 NFI. There's a whole group of them at near Blackwarry on the Grand Ridge Road in Gippsland who've been talking through this contact, as you'll probably hear from the record on this digital recorder.
Okay.
The inception to the spanning of Bass Strait.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, that's right.
Could you just hold on to that while I put the... Posing for photographs. They decided that there should be something something of a commemoration.
Open the champagne.
I've never looked worse. Windburnt, sunburnt, overweight, stressed. This is the prelude to our HF night. Dave setting up for 80
Dave,
metres.
3ASE, is preparing for tonight's 80 metre transmissions over on the other hill. You can see him there, tying off one end of the 80 metre dipole, as you see. We trace it back, and there's a pole there to which he has tied a squiddly pole, and the wire goes off to another end of a dipole up there on that hill opposite. And the sun is setting on Deal Island on Sunday the 10th of January 2021. And we'll cut that there. Sorry to be starting the live part of the transmission so late. I'll just check that my levels are upright. Okay, I hope people are still with us. I'll just check on the live stream. Gosh, 18 concurrently watching. Apologies for the extraordinarily bad internet connection earlier. I don't know quite what happened. I think it's just a case of general congestion, not something that I can predict from week to week. But very shortly I'll be opening up for anybody who'd like to call in on 147.475 megahertz. The streaming has been so unreliable tonight that at some stage in the future, maybe in a couple of months' time, I'll complete everything that I've transmitted tonight, hopefully without the interruptions. So much for NBN. Don't start me.
Anyway, I should explain that I have a fairly heavy cold. Where I got it from, I have no idea, because I've been shut in this house most of the time. I've been checked that it's not COVID. It's not COVID. I've been checked twice, but I'm very heavily congested, so we'll keep it fairly short tonight and probably head off at midnight. But meantime, with apologies for the lateness of the hour, I'll open it up on 147.475. So this is VK3AML. Now calling for anybody who'd like to call in on 147.475. VK3AML standing by for any calls.
Yeah, 3ACZ.
VK3 Echo Charlie Golf.
Have we got any other callers? VK3 ECG and VK3 ACZ. Hang on, I've got to change my monitoring because we're now on radio. And okay, that should be better now. Do we have anybody apart from ECG and ACZ? VK3AML, standing by. Nope. Sounds like we've just got the regulars. VK3 ACZ first. VK3 AML. How's your week been? Looking forward to seeing you on Monday night. And what you've seen tonight is the long version, of which there'll be a short version by Monday night. VK3 ACZ, VK3 AML and group.
VK3AML in the group from VK3ACZ. Good evening, Chris. Good evening, Dave. 3ECG and to other listeners. Wow, tonight's broadcast, test transmission really brought home what an amazing adventure the whole thing was, Chris. Thoroughly impressed. The stream for me was usually around 40-45 seconds behind your VHF audio. That wasn't a problem. Yeah, I did get stuck with a bit of buffeting, which I presumed was coming out of the telephone and or the cell at my end. I did see about 4 minutes of you standing in front of the lighthouse at one stage there. It just wouldn't shift there, but I'm glad I saw the bit with you looking through the scope in the infrared. That was seeing you all green, and that really brought it home. A couple of questions. One is, I'm just curious what sort of telescopic sight that was. Hope it was a Leopold, but or Leupold as they're called, but no, it wouldn't matter. It could be an El Cheapo, a Nico Sterling or something, El Cheapo, Chinese or Japanese. It wouldn't have mattered. It was sufficient for the purpose, I'm sure. But you said a word there that I actually looked up in the dictionary in case it was there, and that was transmissivity. I'm not sure that I found it, but you displayed my lack of knowledge there. I didn't begin to factor in scintillation whatsoever. You know, I'm just not haven't thought through the whole idea of light beams and all that. But anyway, you're to be congratulated again. What a marvellous achievement it was, and just being there, watching the excitement on your face, even though it was green, really brought home how good it all was. But anyway, to answer your question quickly, been a good week here, so pleased to be able to lock up. Haven't been really doing any DX. I've only had one 20-metre contact over to west of the US of A, but I hope to make up for that. I didn't go out playing portable today because it was just too windy. Yeah, looking forward to Monday night. When I was stuck with buffeting or whatever, I did console myself with the idea that we'll probably see something like that on Monday night. So all that to say, I'm all the more looking forward to it, and I think I can predict everybody's response when they see it on Monday night. Anyway, enough waffle for this over. I'll put it back to you so that you can give Dave a go. VK3AML from VK3ACZ.
VK3ACZ and group VK3AML. Well, the term is transmissivity. It's used in atmospheric physics to describe the ability of the atmosphere to transmit light of different wavelengths. And in general, the light transmits better at longer wavelengths, and I see we're starting to get buffered frames again. God, this is an awful night on internet. Last 5 weeks or so have been really good, and tonight when I have something decent to show visually, it flakes. It goes well, and then all of a sudden there'll be a complete halt, so that somebody must be downloading films or something. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, and I emphasise that I was at my worst at that stage because I thought that I would be Mr. Big Man, and nobody was going to tell me that I'd be a bad sailor, and so I wasn't going to have those quells, those seasick pills. I was a bigger man than that. No, I wasn't. I irrigated the back of the boat on about 20 occasions over a 3-hour period. Funnily enough, the worst of the seasickness was not really when the sea was heavy, but when it was just this regular woomph, woomph, woomph swell. And you just eventually are thinking, oh, I wish that rhythm of swell would stop, and then eventually your stomach says the same thing off the back of the boat. I had my head through the stern rail for a lot of that trip. On the way back, Dave 3ASE was kind enough to suggest that I have one of his spare Quells pills, and I had one, and not a problem. All the way back, no problem at all. Shot everything well, although it was as rough as guts on the way back. I didn't show that part. We shot an awful lot of video. I've only shown you a small proportion in the hour that's gone by. I'm glad that I did, though, because there was a lot of historical detail there that was worth shooting. Just a pity that I couldn't show it properly tonight, and the internet continues to flake. I've had to completely relaunch the stream once. I hope I don't have to do it again. It's just a pity that what goes up on the internet permanently will be so balky. VK3ECG and the group. Over to you, Dave. And I had Steve 3SL over here this morning, actually, dropping off a video projector for Monday night's presentation of some of this stuff at the Sherbrooke Rodeo Club. And we had a bit of a discussion. He told me a little bit more of your background, Dave, both in terms of music and in terms of academia. You've done a lot in your life, Dave. VK3ECG and group VK3AML, with a pause in case anybody else would like to break in.
Yes, VK3AML, VK3 Echo Charlie Golf, and good evening to you, Peter, as well. Yes, well, I suppose the longer you're around, the more you get done. I suppose that's one way to look at it. But I always trying to get involved in all kinds of different things and interesting things that are going on. It's been a reasonably interesting week, one way or another. Quite busy from a work-wise, mostly sort of administration and things like that, and actually starting one of my new groups of students for a course. So that sort of went on into the evening because most of the people we're teaching tend to be people who are at work anyway, so we tend to do this sort of get-together sessions at sort of 7:30 till 8:30, 9 o'clock at night on Zoom and things like that. So there's a little bit of that goes on now for the next few weeks, not every week, but sort of just keeping everyone in touch with each other, and it helps a lot when you're able to discuss things and give feedback as things are going on. Yes, seasickness. Oh, yes, indeed. I'm actually not too bad. I don't get too badly affected. But probably the worst experience I had was a trip that Sally and I took. We were in France. This is when we lived in the UK, and we'd gone across to France and on the ferries, of course, and came back. And on this occasion, it was a really rough sea. And I remember leaving the harbour in France, and the boat just sank rapidly. You know, sort of the back of the boat would drop right down, leaving your stomach behind. It was that sort of feeling as if you're on a roller coaster. And this continued for most of the trip across. We probably would have been all right on the channel, but unfortunately there was a yacht in difficulty in the middle of the channel, and so the cross-channel ferry, you know, they're big boats, basically just had to stop to provide support for this small yacht. Now, the problem there was, of course, that whilst the ferries are going along at reasonable speed, they've got stabiliser fins that actually correct for a lot of the roll and the yawing and pitching. And, of course, as soon as the boat stops, is no longer underway, then of course you don't get any of the benefits from these stabilisers. And I must admit, it's the first time I've walked ashore and felt the land moving as if I was still at sea. I don't think I was sick, but I found my way rapidly to the centre of the boat, right in the middle of the sort of rotation point, and that really did help once I got to that spot. It wasn't helped by a number of French people drinking a bottle of brandy close to me and then becoming rather unwell, but apart from that, it was one of those interesting occasions. Yeah, so this weekend's been okay. I mean, actually had to deal some work with some trees. We had a lot of big branches and half of trunks, split trunks had come down in the storms we've had recently, so it was get the chainsaw out and chop that up a bit today. So I was a bit busy doing that, but very much looking forward to finding out a bit more about the light transmission stuff. Anyway, back to you, Chris. VK3AML in the group, VK3 Echo Charlie Golf.
VK3CG and the group, VK3AML. Yeah, as you say, gardening's been difficult to do the last few weeks because the weather's been so crap. I mean, I was hoping to have 2 consecutive days without rain so that I could do some mowing, and the grass just got longer and longer and longer. We have an electric lawnmower which is a bit gutless, so when it's been really heavily raining, it tends to grab and rip the grass rather than cutting it, and rapidly stalls itself, plus the grass rips out of the ground with great big black clods all over the place. So it really has been weather that's doesn't involve sitting in front of a computer, so I've been able to do a little bit of editing. It's just that, you know, having edited the stuff so carefully, to have it all stuff up as a result of unpredictable internet, frustrating. I think what'll happen is I'll re-edit the stuff in 4K. A lot of the material is shot in 4K, and put that up as a non-live upload. For those who are watching on the stream, that is a flat light LED, and as you might be able to see, it's mounted on a CPU heatsink, which is going on it at the back eventually. That is a 40-watt LED. It needs a lot of heat sinking because you have to maintain the junction temperature at 40 degrees C or lower. So they've designed this on a copper slug. It's actually the light emitting device, that red square in the middle of that square window, is embedded in a copper block so that that the heat is withdrawn all around it. The problem with light emitting diodes is that as their temperature goes up, their efficiency goes down. So to increase their efficiency to the maximum amount, you have to heat sink them very carefully, and that's what this is all about. That'll eventually be on the back of a Fresnel collimator. Next week, if I can get the stream running better or somehow slow down the upload speed, which I might be able to do with this OBS software, I'll run a couple of recent NASA videos where not only are they talking about using optical communication, laser communication, they've actually done it. They've actually put high-speed internet connection through to a satellite that was pointed at the moon and got several hours out of it before they intentionally crashed the device on the moon. As the NASA chap said, the connection speed of Apollo 11 in 1969 was basically 4 to 6 K per second. That's kilobytes per second. By using a laser and a system of ground stations that can receive on infrared, they can achieve, or they have achieved, about 60 gigabytes per second. And of course, with a laser beam beamed from the moon and no air in between except for a very short space of atmosphere at the receiving end, the beam is not hugely divergent as it is with S-band microwaves. So the budget, the signal-to-noise budget, is much better when using lasers than using radio. And NASA is actually talking about changing a lot of their satellite communication from RF to optical. This is not fantasy or my fantasy, having been involved with it so long. It's actually happening, and I'll play those videos from the NASA source next week. So with that, back to Peter, VK3ACZ. I'm looking forward to seeing you on Monday night, Peter. I probably will have most of your car full of equipment: a screen, a video projector, tripod, the white light beam communicator, the transceiver for light beam that you saw on deal. I'll have that with me, and I'll be firing it up at the rooms. I'll also have to take probably an amplifier and speakers, so it's going to be a pretty full load. That'll be the first Radio Club presentation I've done of any of this stuff. It's taken a long time for the radio clubs to become publicly accessible again. Otherwise, I probably would have presented all this on the radio clubs back in about March or April. And hopefully we can have 10 people or more on Monday night. VK3ACZ and group VK3AML.
Yeah, with a pause. Yeah, VK3AML and the group from VK3ACZ. And my first comments I want to direct towards seasickness. Oh dear. Don't let anybody convince you that it's all psychological or in the mind. I tried doing that, and when I did start to get inevitably seasick, it was way more horrible. And I think I've said before, I can go on record any time as saying the worst part of seasickness is that it doesn't stop the moment you get back on dry land. No, even the pier is still bobbing up and down and all over the place. And I know that if you break a bone, a major bone, morphine is one of the best inventions. Well, when you're seasick, intramuscular Stemetil is one of the best inventions. Dave, help me out. I'm sure you will agree with that. It's just an awful, awful feeling. There have been times when I've been seasick going over to Tasmania on the ferry, being out in a scollop boat in the bay, and on those occasions I would, if there was a gun nearby, I'm sure I would shoot myself in the head. It's that bad. But anyway, enough of all that. To get back to, well, Monday night at least, no drama about filling up the car. That'll be good. I've pre-warned Jim that we might be a fraction late-ish if the traffic is really bad that time of day. And he's another club member is coming around to help him shift a stove, so he said even he might be a fraction late. And by late, I mean after 6 o'clock. The meeting doesn't start till 19:30, but everybody likes to turn up around 1800. Don't ask me why. I guess everybody's really keen to get out there and do a bit, especially after we've been locked up for a while, which once again hasn't been my favourite experience. And I understand what you're saying about not being able to mow the lawns, Chris, so that's what I should have done today. And I'm going to kick myself now. Anybody who's in Melbourne knows that we've had about 2 to 3 hours now of fairly persistent, long, soaking rain, and which might, looking at the weather radar, might be ending shortly, but no, the ground's going to be soggy for a while to come. But anyway, back to you, Chris, VK3AML and the group from VK3ACZ.
VK3ACZ and group VK3AML. I was just watching my upload speed. It's varying from 2.8 to 3.5 megabytes per second, and it should be running at 25 megabytes per second. That's how poor it is tonight. Really bad. Really bad. It's an order of magnitude worse in upload speed than it should be, which no wonder it's halting. It's going from yellow to green. I'm looking at the status. Great pity, internet has the potential to be so wonderful, and the way successive governments stuffed it in this country. I don't care which side you vote for, they both stuffed it. Anything that's proposed by one government, the other government will vote against, purely because the first government voted for it in the first place. I mean, and it's our money. It's our money. Sorry, I've had my whinge, I'll get off my soapbox. But, gun down a politician today. I don't care which side they're on. At my age, I've seen faults on both sides. I tend to lean slightly the colour that my jumper is at the moment, but really sometimes the decisions made by these people make me wonder. And the result is that we've now got NBN internet that costs about 3 times as much as was originally proposed and works about 10 times slower. And in a country like ours that is so remote and has so many outliers needing communication, I really despair. If this is the best they can do in the metropolitan area of the second largest city in Australia, what must the outback be like? Okay, around to Dave. Any suggestions for chemical amelioration of motion sickness? VK3ECG and group VK3AML.
Yes, VK3AML and the group VK3 Echo Charlie Golf. Well, I think you've covered them all pretty much, actually. Yes, now I think the sort of the standard sort of highest in type quell stuff apparently does a reasonable job. I've not really, as I said, I've not really taken them, and because I'm not that badly affected. But most trips I've taken have been, in boats have been sort of an overnight one, or most 7 to 8 hours. And I think it was one I did to Spain from Southampton. That was sort of probably about 15, 16 hours on a ferry, and but I was fine then. So I'm not particularly affected, but absolutely, Stemetil's great. Prochlorperazines are really quite a good thing to use, although it is prone to a few weirdo side effects, and it's prescription only, unlike wandering into the pharmacy and getting some quells and things like that. So I mean, there's lots of options for those things, but I always found the best thing to do is to try to not be going up and down. That might sound a bit like a silly thing to say when you're on a boat, but if you can find that sort of pivot point, the sort of the point at which the boat actually is stable, and then it's just rotating around that point, then I found sitting there is the best place. And what I'd done before is literally find my way down the sort of ferry until I found the corridor that seems to be not going up or down, and then sitting on the floor of the corridor at that sort of pivot point, and it's worked quite well, actually. So I'm just probably one of those lucky people, but there we are. Yeah, I mean, it's hopefully the talk will go well. It is actually been really sort of depressing having these episodes where you plan for something and then the whole thing gets thrown out, of course, and it's understandable. Certainly with Delta, I think now the transmissible rate is so high that, and there's these sort of very sort of quite scary transient exposures have been really challenging. It's actually almost a completely different game than the public health game exercises were in trying to deal with the original strain we had last year. But Delta's, I think, poses some really interesting additional problems for them. And even my choir has been, we've had to stop all our rehearsals and things like that. My daughter's choirs had to cancel their concert completely, and our choir. I mean, we've got actually somebody who's actually in the New South Wales Health Department some years ago, and he's now collecting the vaccination data with all the right issues around privacy and things like that. So that we can just get a better sort of handle on what our risk profile is, because as is often the way with community choirs, even one such as ours, which does quite a lot of interesting things and difficult works, the age of the choir, there's some good young voices there, but there's a lot of older people, and of course they're at significant increased risk. But fortunately, a lot of people now are getting vaccinated, and that's great to see. I think I've had my second AZ jab. It would be 2 months ago now. So I was one of the very early groups. So I had my first one in March and my second one in June, and it's just about 8 weeks since the second one now. But and my the family are having all of theirs. So. We're doing all we can, and I think that's all you can do in this situation, really. It's fascinating. The LEDs, and looking at those really bright LEDs now. I mean, it's amazing, and I'm quite fascinated by the photonic lattice stuff, because there's some interesting crystalline sort of things, I think, linked to various minerals as well. I think opals and things like that have a similar sort of lattice structure. So and a lot of I think animal coloration and visual effects are caused by the same crystalline structure. So I didn't realise that extended to LEDs as well. Fascinating. Anyway, Chris, back to you. VK3AML, VK3 Echo Charlie Golf.
VK3 CG and group VK3AML. What I'll have to do is to throttle back the speed of this YouTube live stream even further next week. Something has definitely changed since last week. I'm damned if I know what it is. All the connections and coding are precisely the same. 44.1 kilohertz mono being uploaded, and 720p. But yep, the light's going on and off and on and off, and there are bulk freeze frames. Strangely, I had trouble signing into YouTube tonight. I tried to sign in on my Chrome browser, no problem there. Then I tried to sign in on Firefox, and that's normally the one I use. It's the one that's worked best. It wouldn't sign in. I don't know what was going on. Something's changed, something odd, but I've got a feeling it's something to do with YouTube itself. It may actually be YouTube as a service, though I wouldn't expect it at this time of the day. I'd expect it at a time when American usage is highest. And it's frozen again. Oh well, choirs that you're involved with, Dave, is it the InterVarsity choral business or what exactly? Curious about that. And I've decided to go for another COVID test tomorrow morning just to get a clearance by Monday night, because I've got quite stuffed up in the head. I don't know whether that's obvious from listening to me. And it's getting close to the witching hour, so I better just hand it round. Sorry it has to be so short this week, but with the amount of piddling about with internet that I've had to do just to keep it going and relaunched, it really is maddening. VK3ACZ and group VK3AML.
VK3AML and the group VK3ACZ. Yes, and but speaking of the internet, I've toughed it out the last few weeks, not watching the stream at all. This was one that was definitely a good idea. The visual pictures helped. Last week even you did a brilliant job describing everything, so I didn't feel I'd missed anything. But if I'd not seen those pictures, it would have been nowhere near as as good. So glad I did, even with the buffeting. So don't worry too much about that. It's a bit like Hate Chef. You know, we're used to what we can't control. Hi. And I did appreciate the duplex arrangement of it. That was so cool as compared to what we're used to. You know, no problems with doubling and heterodynes or anything like that. It was great to have that mode of communication, and I'm so impressed. But anyway, Chris, you don't sound like you're all stuffed up. I mean, yeah, I've heard the cough a couple of times, but Dave may have a more trained, calibrated eardrum than mine, but you seem to sound okay. VK3AML on the group, VK3ACZ.
VK3ACZ and group VK3AML. Well, I've had all the classic symptoms of flu, mild case of flu or a bad cold. Could be a bad cold, I don't know. The fact that we've been locked down so much and so unable to get out to the normal amount of exercising probably has not helped. And the weather over the last few weeks, really, it's been one of the most appalling winters that I think I've ever lived through, as far as Melbourne goes. Not really wet, but just drizzly and dark. And just the other day we saw the sun for about 3 hours, and I thought, God, they should declare a public holiday with that. We've seen so little of the sun that I actually was unused to seeing it coming through the window. It gave me a bit of a shock. You know, that sort of a thing you'd expect out of Invercargill in New Zealand, but not bloody Melbourne. God. Anyway, I look forward to the better weather. Don't we all? And look forward to a decent meeting on Monday night. Borrowing Steve's video projector, it's capable of 1080p, so it looks really good on a screen. It's also very bright. The existing data projector that the club has, it's VGA, it can do 480p, but really if you've shot the videos in much better definition with a lot of colour in them, you need a bit more brightness and a bit more definition. So I decided to borrow some gear. I'll get it working tomorrow with our clips and then bring the kit and caboodle on Monday night. Thanks to your lift. So thank you in advance. Yeah, so over to Dave. Are they inter-varsity choral festivals or what sort of a choir are you involved with? I've come across a few people involved with a few choirs in my time. There was a tutor that I had for Certificate 4 in Training and Assessment, which I went for at Box Hill TAFE about 15 years ago. And she was involved with a choir of South African expatriates, I think they were. So there are certainly a lot of specialist choirs about at the moment. VK3 ECG and group VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML and the group VK3ECG. Yes, the choir is Victoria Chorale. So it was a group that Val Pyers established because he founded originally Melbourne Chorale, and then, well, for various sort of political things, I think they parted ways, and some of the choir left and joined and formed the new choir, Victoria Chorale. This is before my time, and really, actually, I got to sing originally because my daughter's primary school, which is where I met Steve for the first time, because he was my daughter's choir teacher. And and while I was there, one of the teachers at the school, who was a very, very good musician, actually an engineer, and a primary school teacher then, and now middle school and music teaching, and he sort of set up a little parents' choir for the end of year school concert or something at the primary school, and handed out some music, and I just, because I'd done a lot of singing back in church choirs and stuff years ago, and so I just sort of sang it, and he said, "Oh, are you doing any singing?" And I said, "Well, not really at the moment, because we'd only recently arrived in Australia, and I've been busy at work and things." And he suggested I come along to Victoria Chorale, and then Val Pyers kept asking me to come along for various things, and it went on from there. So, but yeah, really, it's a nice break from all kinds of work things, and when you're singing in something like that, you're concentrating all the time on something completely different from your ordinary work, and that's really the nice thing about it in many ways. Yeah, you see, the stream has been very strange tonight, hasn't it? And I don't know whether I've not noticed anything particular about my internet. We're never terribly good at this QTH. In fact, I've moved my phone onto a 5G Telstra contract, and that's a lot better than my land broadband, if you like, or the landline broadband for the internet, which is, I presume, is fibre to the curb or something, or to the node or whatever, and. Yeah, so it has been very weird. I was wondering what browser works best. I mean, YouTube's I think is owned by Google now, so whether the Chrome browsers might work better. But I suppose it also depends on what OBS is working best with, I suppose. Perhaps more so than the YouTube side, but haven't really tried. Different sort of browsers. I use obviously Safari on the Mac a lot, and Chrome, and the ordinary Windows one, whichever the current version of Windows is at the moment, Microsoft Edge or something like that. And but I don't notice a great deal of difference between them, I must say. Anyway, look, I won't hold it because you don't sound too bad, I have to say, Chris. But it can be very wearing and very tiring having these sort of virally bugs and things like that. So I'll let you get some rest and get things sorted out for Monday then. Anyway, so I won't hold it anymore, and I'll pass it back to you, and all the best for the week. VK3AML in the group, VK3 Echo Charlie Golf.
Do we have another breaker there? I thought I heard a little bit of a heterodyne low down in the background. VK3AML standing by? Anybody else want to break in? VK3 Alpha Mike Lima?
VK3BYY.
VK3BYY, VK3AML. You been listening long?
Yes, I have. Been doing a few things in the shack, a bit of work and a bit of play, and watching the YouTube most of the time. Dropped out there for about 15 minutes, which was very odd because I could go to your page and it would give me it would sometimes appear to be there, and I'd start playing it and it was actually last week's. But eventually it came good and we saw the rest of it, so that was interesting. Just missed out on the bits about the new LEDs, unfortunately, but all the rest was very good. One possibility perhaps with the internet is something called the Olympics. It's on apparently at the moment. Apparently very popular, and they're running dozens of different streams for that, I think. And I'm not sure whether some of that goes through YouTube. It wouldn't surprise me if YouTube was a channel provider. I know people in the household here watch it through one of the television streaming services, so that could well be blocking up the NBN as well. So that's one thought. 3AML in the group, VK3BYY.
Yeah, VK3BYY. That's a very good thought. Being a very anti-sport person, I tend not to think about the Olympics. I give them about as much thought as I give to the Kardashians. And for the first 10 years I heard about the Kardashians, I thought they were a disease. Having seen one of the television programs, I now know that they're a disease. Fortunately, one that didn't affect me. BYY. Victoria Corral. It will floor you, Dave, to hear that Val Pyers was my geography teacher from 1968 to 1971 at Camberwell High, where he was on the staff. And very dapper, very cultured, very good at disciplining a class, as you might imagine, probably having seen him under choral circumstances. But because of his extremely short stature and his red hair, he acquired the nickname of Barney Rubble, because he did look a bit like Barney Rubble from the Flintstones. Very nice guy though, and I met him a couple of times in later life. I think he's been gone now for about 15 years. But a couple of girls, daughters of my godfather, the de Hugard girls, Anne and Jane de Hugard, were members of the Victoria Chorale when Val Pyers was in charge, and they had a great deal of sympathy for his situation of political usurp, I think would be the best description. And that would have been early 70s. That's a long time ago. So obviously you've been involved with it for a long time, Dave. I'll hand it round to Peter, VK3ACZ first. VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML in the group from VK3ACZ, and that was a very worthwhile and important point about the Olympics too. That could be sucking up a lot of the data that otherwise would make its way to your stream. I've been tempted to look at a couple of things, and I've managed to... I'm not much more of a sporting person than you are, Chris. By the way, I still don't know who the Kardashians are. I've been able to avoid that. I hear the names come up, but I just don't bother to find out. But as for the Olympics, I've been making do with Roy and HG. I don't know if you were aware of them, but they're a comedy duo who currently are with the ABC, that have a very irreverent and nothing is sacred view on all things sport, and I enjoy their delivery, the fanaticism and some of the silly things they come up with are quite fun, and that to me makes the Olympics into the well-rounded thing that it doesn't deserve to be. But anyway, enough of that. Dave, that you don't get terribly seasick, you don't know how fortunate you are, because and I've said this before, but at first you're worried you're going to die when you're seasick, then you worry that you might not, truly. But anyway, the other thing, Chris, is don't feel that you have to pass this cold on to me on Monday, okay? I'll be quite happy if you keep it to yourself, hi, and do hope over the worst of it for selfish as well as genuine caring reasons, hi. Anyway, I might make this my final too, and I'll just be listening on the side for a while. And thank you again for another interesting test transmission and everything associated with it. As I said before, I'm so glad I did look at the pictures this time, the vision. It really was good. It helped me to really appreciate what an effort and what an achievement it was. Anyway, thank you for that, Chris. VK3AML 73 from over here, VK3ACZ.
Yeah, 73, Peter. Thanks for coming on. Very much appreciate the offer of the lift too on Monday night. I will make sure to wear a mask all the time that I'm with you. Don't want to pass this on. I'm sure it's only a cold, but it's still it's a bit unpleasant in this weather. I don't know. Is Dave 3ECG still with us? Do you have any final comments on Val Pyers and company, Dave? If you're still there, VK3ECG ? VK3AML.
Yes, fine, Chris, yes, from VK3 Echo Charlie Golf, yes. That's a great description of Val, and I can imagine what he would have been like as a classroom teacher. I think sometimes, despite some of the choir being older than he was, at times he treated them as if they were at high school. But he probably deserved it. But he was exacting, but also great fun, and had his own style and approach to things, which was, or not necessarily unique, but he certainly carried off his own style with great aplomb, and it was a great experience to have him conduct. A lot of enthusiasm, and but he very much liked to do things his way, and his way was often a very good way. So not too much to say about that, but the politics was I suspect fascinating, but I wasn't around at that time, so at least I escaped all of that. Anyway, good night to everyone from VK3 Echo Charlie Golf.
Yeah, okay, VK3ECG, VK3AML. I'll hand it round to VK3BYY. And it might be your turn, I think, 3BYY, to tie the ribbons. I'm trying to think of your name, but the lateness of the hour and the fact that I have a cold is probably reducing the oxygen to the old brain box, so you'll have to help me. I'm sorry. VK3BYY, VK3AML.
Yeah, VK3AML, VK3BYY. Yeah, the handle here is Mark Alpha Romeo Kilo. And that's okay. I can't remember anybody's name either. I have to write it down these days, which usually helps, but not always. And yes, fine business there. ACZ, I often hear him on various repeaters around the place. Always interesting things to say. And David there, ECG. I think we may have met once out at the Northeast Radio Group. Vaguely. Anyway, I'm out Watsonia, so sort of, not quite your direction, I think, from the city, but out on the right side of the Yarra, perhaps. Yeah, so that's all very interesting. Yeah, okay. Yes, as far as sport and things go, I watch very little. I've been doing archery for quite a long time, though not particularly competitive in that, just for the enjoyment. And this is the only time, once every 4 years, or occasionally you get a little bit on the Commonwealth Games, but normally it's something that's in the Olympics, but gets very, very little airtime. But the internet has changed that fantastically. Instead of sort of one or two television channels to watch, they're able to run dozens of streams and replays of all the sports. So been watching a bit of archery, which is quite interesting. And the Australian guy was doing pretty well, but I haven't caught up with the results. I don't think he won, but we did have an Australian doing pretty well there at one stage. Yeah, so that's all. I'll let you go, and we'll tune in or log in next week for another exciting test transmission. VK3AM on the group, VK3BY clear.
No worries, VK3BYY. This is VK3AML. I might as well round it off for the group. Thanks for coming up, Mark. Look forward to you doing it again very soon. We can always do with another person to talk to after the missions, as Dave used to call them. I believe Dave 3ASC is progressing well with the idea of getting an HF licence, as in a broadcast HF licence for about the 2.3 meg area. So he may be on at odd hours with some very interesting stuff, but not on the ham bands, of course. I think he's lost interest in ham radio to some extent. He's been at it a very long time, I think 1973 or 4, and doing it every week would be a bind too. If I had done it for that amount of time, I think I'd be prepared to give it away and try something else, as he is. So I think with Dave the case is, watch this space. He's always up to something interesting. Anyway, with that, I'll close. Apologies for the poorness of the internet. I was really hoping that it was going to be good this week so that I could get a really decent upload of all this Lightbeam stuff, but I'm going to have to separately upload it. YouTube Live is simply, at this stage, and with NBN being what it is just not reliable enough to rely on for uploads, particularly anything above 720p. And even 720p tonight's been pushing it. VK3 Alpha Mike Lima now closing the transmission for the week. Thank you very much for coming up, ACZ, ECG, BYY, and on the stream, John Young particularly.
John Young suggests that we should have light beam DX as an Olympic sport. I can tell you, John, that after walking up to the top of the hill on, 1,000 feet in a very steep track, which was also very slippery, at night to do that light beam stuff, I felt like I'd done an Olympic sport. And Dan DTM, 3K3 DTM, thank you for coming up. Ian, I presume is Ian in St Kilda. Ian, my political adversary, but my intellectual friend. I think that's the best description with Ian. And most people don't seem to mind politics as long as you lump crap on all of them. So with that, Paul VK3HN, thank you for coming up. Robert Reeve, Dennis the avid YouTube watcher, our friend in Canberra. Steve Haynes, we've had the RI on. I'm glad I've kept everything legal. And he says he very much enjoyed watching the light beam video. I'm just sorry that it couldn't have been a bit more continuous. Terry Sims, as always. Terry, one of my most constant radio friends. Thank you all very much for your participation. There have been a total of 63 people in and out on the net, and probably a dozen or so listening on the radio. So thank you all very much, and this is VK3AML now concluding the YouTube stream for the week. Wishing you all the best until next week, 9:30 p.m, 147.475, or on the stream that will be 7th. The 7th of August 2021 stream. VK3AML now